All right, we're on part 6 here of hydrotherapy, looking at the theory and practice of hydrotherapy as a modality of treatment. And just want to remind you that any type of treatment that comes along, you want to make sure you do your own due diligence on finding out if that's going to work with your paradigm of care, as well as in just the scope of the physiology of the human body. Because actually may be counterintuitive when you look deeper into it and not actually be something you want to participate in. So just make sure you do your own due diligence. So each thing we talk about is simply another arrow in the quiver that you can use for helping to maintain or regain wellness. The Newark Advocate in January of 1903 published this saying by Thomas Edison that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame and diet and the cause and prevention of disease. We still haven't quite got there yet. There's preventative medicine programs around, but they really haven't got to the point where they're actually working on prevention. There's more money in providing treatments rather than actually the underlying causes. There's only one way that heaven approves of practicing the healing art, according to Testimonies for the Church, written in 1885, and they're just simply the simple modalities that God has made for us: cleanliness, pure air and water, proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God. But these take time to put into practice and skillful application, and many people just don't want to take the time of day to do that. But they are inexpensive, readily available, and non-taxing on the body, unlike the pharmaceutical approach in the long run. In 3 John 1 verse 2 stated that, "Beloved, I pray that you prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." So we want to take care of our souls because that can have a direct bearing on our physiology. And in Romans 12, 1 and 2, just a reminder that we are to present ourselves as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, and to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, not conformed to this world. Because that's the perfect will of God. So if you're looking for the will of God, this is part of that. So we're going to look some more at the theory of hydrotherapy. We'll get to the practice here, some of the different applications as we go through this series. But there's some benefits to prolonged application of cold within the context of hydrotherapy. So there's some natural effects of cold. Fever reducing is one of those, so also known as antipyretic. So pyro is fire, anti is against or opposite of. So an antipyretic is something that reduces heat in the body, which fever, which is above normal body temperature, is on fire. So a graduated spray and bath, sponging with cold water can be helpful. An ice pack and rub, enemas and colonics. So essentially you're putting cold water to the interior of the body cavities that can help to thermally alter the temperature in that way. A wet sheet pack, and then air exposure and fanning. So that's not hydrotherapy so much, but those are fever reducing mechanisms. Just want to be careful with the sponging with cold water that you don't actually stimulate a warming response in the process of doing that, which is what you would happen if you did a short sponging with cold water. So the key here is prolonged use of cold water. So what's a graduated spray? So it's actually a shower that begins around 102 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the temperature is quickly raised to the tolerance of the individual who's being showered, and is maintained until the patient is ready for the temperature to be gradually lowered to 93.5. So 93.5 is actually below normal body temperature, so it will feel cold. So you're actually building up the body temperature, warming up to tolerance, and then gradually lowering it down. And that's going to have a cold effect and actually fever reducing kind of effect in the long run. You can also use prolonged cold for a decongestive and a depressant. If you use it a localized use, not systemic. So, like for example, on a limb or a digit. So an ice pack or bag, a localized bath. So essentially, that'd be putting your hand in cold water and putting it there. So if you burn yourself on the stove under the water, that cools the tissues down, stops the burning process in the deeper tissues. A cold compress or direct application of ice, and you can use just free ice to do that. And the same kind of thing those same modalities can be used on the reflex points. Remember, we talked about that a few presentations ago, where they can have distant effects by applying heat or cold to the reflex points of the body. So not necessarily directly applying them to the specific location. But the ice packs and the cold compresses are a great way to use the ice and then the cold for a prolonged period of time. Mild heating is the next one after prolonged cold. So there's no sweating that's involved with mild heating. And the primary action is what you're looking for, the primary reaction. So flushed skin due to vasodilation, essentially increasing the size of the blood vessels, the capillaries, to allow more blood flow to the region. So general use that produces sedation or a calming effect, sleepiness, a continuous flowing bath of warm water, a wet sheet pack, not cold, just wet, can also be used in a mild heating. So the body begins a warming response in response to that. A localized warm bath, so on a limb, for example, or a digit. And fomentations. Fomentations are towels, for example, that have been put in hot water and wrung out extensively and then put over the affected area, typically used in congestion and things like that, and covered with a blanket or towel to have that warming effect on the area. So I remember growing up having that done on my chest for chest congestion, but it can be used in other parts of the body too. And then you can do the same thing on reflex points, and it has a relaxing effect. So heating compressed, a warm bath, and mild fomentations, or the use of Kenny packs. So what's a Kenny pack? So a Kenny pack was initiated by an Australian woman named Elizabeth Kenny in the 1940s in response to her clinical observations with response to the polio outbreak. And she actually came to the United States and was very influential in utilizing her modalities, which was against the conventional wisdom, which kept the patient quiet and calm and non-moving during their convalescence. She advocated using hot packs, constant limb movement. And what she found was that there was only a 15% paralysis in those individuals that used the hot packs and the constant movement, as compared to those that use the conventional therapies that relied on non-movement and other modalities. If you look into this, it probably had a detoxifying effect as a process, as a part of it. I think it was primarily influencing young children. And if you go back and look at some of the things that were in use at a popular and large scale during that period of time, there's some chemicals that were used, one of which was DDT, which is an insecticide and a neurotoxin. And many of the kids would run behind the fogging trucks, playing in the fog that was used to kill the mosquitoes. And that has been indicated as being one of the key factors for polio. So it was neurotoxin that was actually exposed to the kids. And one of the difficult things about that is it didn't uniformly toxify every person that came in contact in the same way. But just something to think about, the idea of a contagion could come more as an exposure to a toxin as opposed to something that's communicable from person to person. Just something to be aware of. But Elizabeth Kenny is the person, when you see that Kenny pack philosophy, she's the one who initiated that. In the lower picture, she's the woman with the white hair. And the upper picture is when she was a younger person. So she'd come over. The lower picture is her visit to the United States to teach practitioners the Kenny pack philosophy. So moderate heating is also another modality that can be used. And the treatment initiates a mild sweating or perspiration And so it can be a hot bath. So it can be limb specific. You can see the individual up on the upper right is getting both his arms and legs treated in a bath, a water bath, but not his main torso and abdomen. You can see the man on the lower left. Looks like he's still dressed in his three-piece suit and having his water therapy. He's got his arms in the arm tanks and his legs in the feet tanks. Can do a hot blanket pack or a wet sheet pack. And the picture here is from Kellogg's Rational Hydrotherapy, showing a wet sheet pack. And that is not cold water. It's just lukewarm water that the individual is wrapped in and wrapped in a blanket. And as the body thermally overcomes the tepid water that the sheet has been in, the body has an overall moderate heating effect that is noted as a byproduct of that. Then we have another application, marked heating, a reaction with a natural action and sweating as a byproduct of it. So the previous one, there was no sweating. That was as a byproduct of it. So first of all, it's a treatment that's focused on surface vasodilation or the blood vessel enlarging all over the body. So here's an example of a steam bath. So a full body warm bath where you're going to be immersed completely in the warm water. A hot local bath. So that would be someone like in the previous one where they had their limb in a tank or a bucket. A hot blanket pack, a wet sheet pack, which we just saw, a steam bath, and fomentations, and that would, with a higher level of heat than what you would see with mild heat. So the key reaction that you're looking for is a promotion of sweating, and the sweating in this case will help in detoxification. And just pay attention to the temperature of the individual in any kind of a hydrotherapy where you're using heat, so you don't have excessive rise in body temperature. Also, the treatments can stimulate circulation of blood and stimulate the metabolism. A hot full bath, a steam bath, a fever cabinet can do that too, fever therapy. The picture on the left is an example of a fever cabinet. So it's a place, an enclosed space where the patient or the person is systemically or entire body is warmed and made hot, so their body temperature rises, or an insulating blanket. Those are some different ways that therapy can be implicated, or not implicated, but implemented. Also, you can do local treatments, stimulating circulation and overall metabolism. So whirlpool or circulating water. The person in the central picture have their arm in a jetted sink. They can do that with the lower limbs too. So you can do that with the limbs or entire body immersion. Fomentations, again, the Kenny pack with 5 minutes of extremity movement. So that's hot fomentations, or not, yeah, hot fomentations with extremity movement. Hot water bottles, paraffin bath. So that immersion of the limb or hand into paraffin is a prolonged heating effect with the paraffin as it cools. I remember playing with paraffin after having candles as a kid, dipping my hand and the finger in the hot wax and playing with that, and has a kind of a prolonged therapeutic benefit when used over a larger area. Thermal mud baths also can be helpful, and various types of heating apparatuses and hot air. So they can also be used on reflex points, as we've seen the other modalities have benefit. So there are 17 remedial properties of water that have been delineated by Abbott, Moore, and Nelson. The first is a tonic effect. So by definition, these are just some definitions that will be used in future times and throughout. A tonic tends toward health. It promotes nutrition and circulation. A pure stimulant is essentially the opposite of a tonic, and it increases vital activities of body organs, essentially turns them on and accelerates their activity. So you can think of various stimulants. Things can have stimulating effects that are beneficial. Things can also have stimulating effects that are pharmacological, thinking of like caffeine, but even cold water can be a stimulant in a way when done suddenly. So a sedative has a calming or relaxing or rest promoting effect. things that are antispasmodic, reduce or relax spasms or convulsions. And many times people find that heat helps that. Actually, even electrical therapy can be beneficial. So think of a TENS unit, essentially helping to relax the muscles by sending an electric pulse through the area of effect. Can also function as a depressant. If there's a system that is overactive, hyperactive, sometimes people get into a hyperactive state, and water can help to reduce the overactivity of the system if used appropriately. Also pain relief. So an anodyne, pain relief is a common way that people use water, either whirlpools or fomentations, heat cold packs. It can be used in a variety of different ways for overcoming pain. A spoilative. So that increases oxidation and tissue breakdown. So often utilized in weight loss types of situations. So water can be helpful in that type of a application. Diaphoresis, essentially that's a technical term for sweating. So producing sweating. And sweating has been known from ancient times to be a way of detoxifying. So basically our skin is our largest excretory organ. Never really thought about it that way before probably, but it is an excretory organ through our sweat. And just things are thrown off. In fact, boils and pustules and things like that are the body's effect to get rid of toxins rapidly. Diuresis, this is promotion of urine production, and you can do that both by drinking water as well as by changing the temperature. I remember just becoming aware of the fact as a scuba diver that at the end of a dive, I always had a bladder full. And it was basically because I was diving in 45-degree water, and the coldness tended to create a change in kidney function and would create a need to urinate right away. So there are many different therapeutic uses of water in that regard. So eliminative. So essentially we talked about that in respect to diaphoresis and sweating, but it promotes kidney function, and that would be the cold water, for example, and the skin sweating, and just general respiration. So that is one of our body's mechanisms of offloading metabolic byproducts. CO2, carbon dioxide, is one of the key gases that we give off through cellular respiration. And when we exhale, CO2 is released. Plants take those up and thrive on that. And we take in the oxygen they produce. So God designed a beautiful system where plants provide the oxygen and the carbohydrates we need to live, and our body burns carbohydrates and uses oxygen in that process and produces energy, water, and carbon dioxide, which the plants then again use. So there's a beautiful cycle that's been created there. Then also a derivative. So a derivative essentially is a term for depleting of a quality in one area of the body to have it referred to another part. And that's drawing blood or lymph from one body area to another. That's the term for what's happening when you do a hot foot soak. If you have a headache, for example, or congestion, doing a hot foot bath can draw the blood away from that area and decongest it and help the headache or the congestion to go away as it's drawn to the lower extremities. Fluxing is greatly increasing the rate of blood flow in a specific part. So that can be done through hot and cold treatments, for example, because we talked about that very early on, that hydrotherapy can function as a second heart, essentially, because we have our pumping mechanism of our heart, but the hot and cold, for example, brings the blood to the surface, drives it away, brings it to the surface, drives it away. So you're flushing blood back and forth from the surface into the depths of the tissues and back and forth in much the same way the heart does. Antipyretic, we referred to that earlier, without the term being displayed, but that's a fever or body temperature reducing effect. We spoke to that earlier this evening. Can also function as a refrigerant. So thirst relief, blood alkalinity restoration. So the free use of drinking water and fruit juices can help restore blood alkalinity. As a revulsive, we've spoke to that a few times ago. A single prolonged treatment followed by a brief cold could be used in a series of 3 rotations. and as an alternate. So a cold treatment, this is basically your contrast therapy. So you a quarter of the amount of time to half the duration of the hot treatment for 3 or more rotations. Typically, more rotations, you have a diminishing return on the reaction. So the kind of the sweet spot is 3 alternate treatments between hot and cold, with a longer warming component of that. And actually, you can end up having a more heated, a higher temperature, withstanding a higher temperature, and then withstanding a colder temperature on each end of the spectrum. But then again, over time, you have a diminishing return over the series of cycles. So if you did a lot of cycles, your body wouldn't be reacting as well. And that could end up having a anti-beneficial effect over time. So here's a couple of pictures of some hydrotherapy whirlpool stands that would have been used in a therapy type of a situation. And one for upper extremities and lower extremities at the same time, or a combination of those. So there's a lot to learn, a lot of different aspects to the application of hydrotherapy, things to pay attention to, terms to understand, and ways of applying it. And we'll be looking at some of those as we continue down the road together. And you can review this at preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com and look at other episodes as well.